Despite tinfoil hat-wearing conspiratorial predictions from jerks like me, former President George W. Bush did not issue any sort of last-minute preemptive pardons before he left office. Pardons for people in his administration who might expect to be investigated and maybe even criminally prosecuted for breaking laws while they held office. People who, say, directed policies like spying on people without warrants, torturing prisoners, illegally politicizing the administration of justice, using federal prosecutors for political partisan ends. There were no preemptive pardons before Bush left office. But according to a brand new exclusive report from Newsweek's investigative correspondent Michael Isikoff, with 4 days left in office, then President Bush did issue preemptive immunity. Preemptive immunity? Yeah, preemptive immunity to his former aides, Harriet Miers and Karl Rove. How can the new government clean itself of the stains left by the last government if the last government has immunity-granting power from the afterlife? It's time for the Rachel Maddow Show special series on President Obama's cleanup mission. Scrub, rinse, repeat, because this is going to take a while. John Conyers, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, subpoenaed Karl Rove, the man known as Bush's brain, to testify next week about the Bush administration's firing of 9 U.S. attorneys and the allegedly partisan-motivated prosecution of Democratic Alabama Governor Don Siegelman. Now, this was Karl Rove's second congressional subpoena, and for a second time, Mr. Rove is claiming that George W. Bush has directed him not to appear. According to Mr. Isikoff's reporting in Newsweek, on January 16th, Bush's White House counsel, Fred Fielding, sent a letter to Mr. Rove's lawyer, relaying this message, quote, "The president continues to direct him not to provide information to Congress." Now, again, I did a little calculating in the commercial break, and if my math is correct, I think that George W. Bush isn't president anymore. So, since he's not president anymore, he's just citizen George W. Bush, how can he immunize anyone from anything? Joining us now is Michael Isikoff, Newsweek's investigative correspondent. Mr. Isikoff, nice to see you. Thank you for your time tonight.
Good to see you, Rachel.
4 days before he left office, you're reporting that President Bush specifically instructed Karl Rove to refuse to appear before Congress. What did he say, and can he do that?
Well, very good question about whether he can do it, and we certainly didn't see this one coming. As I discovered today, there was this letter sent by Fred Fielding, the White House counsel, on January 16th, instructing Rove, in anticipation of that he might receive future subpoenas, the president wanted him to know that he should not honor such subpoenas, he should not appear before Congress, he should not turn over any documents, that the president still was asserting executive privilege over anything Rove did in the White House, and that the president wanted to assert this in perpetuity even after he leaves office. I talked to some constitutional scholars today who say, as far as they know, this is unprecedented for a president about to leave office to make such a sweeping claim to extend to his former aides after they are no longer in the government. But it is part of the aggressive assertions of executive privilege that the Bush White House exerted throughout its tenure.
I am not an expert on this stuff, but what this sounds like to me is that President Bush is saying that anybody who works for the president is immunized, and they're immune from having to respond to congressional subpoenas, not only for the time that they are working for the president, but for the rest of their lives. That's what he's saying?
Well, that seems to be what they're saying. And what's key here is immunity. There's nothing unusual for presidents to assert executive privilege about conversations, particular conversations, that they might have had with senior aides. But what the Bush White House asserted was a version of executive privilege that went considerably beyond that, that aides had total absolute immunity. Not only did could they not talk about particular conversations, they didn't have to show up at all all in response to a congressional subpoena. And so you saw Harriet Miers not show up, Josh Bolten show up when they got subpoenaed, and Karl Rove himself. In fact, in one case, Karl Rove was flying off to give a speaking engagement in the Ukraine, I believe, when he was supposed to be appearing before Congress to testify. So this assertion, this interpretation of executive privilege goes considerably beyond what previous presidents have asserted, and is now the subject of a court challenge in the case of Harriet Miers and Josh Bolten. I think that the disclosure that Fred Fielding had sent this letter sort of joins the battle and shows just how far the Bush White House went. And it's now what's going to be particularly interesting here is in that court battle, it's before the U.S. Court of Appeals, the Obama Justice Department, whose Attorney General is not yet confirmed, will probably be on Monday, has to provide a position in the next couple of weeks about what its position is, the new president's position is on executive privilege. And I think it's a safe bet. It's not going to go as far as the Bush White House went.
Yeah, it's one thing to say, l'état c'est moi. It's another thing to have the power to prevent everybody else in the country from laughing at you when you assert that. It'll be fascinating to see how the Obama administration responds. Well, Mike, congratulations on the scoop, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Michael Isikoff is Newsweek's investigative correspondent.